Zara Thorne had buried one husband already, and she would be damned if she spent her clan's centennial reunion explaining why she had not found another. The invitation sat on her kitchen table, cream parchment embossed with the tusked boar of her grandfather's line, announcing 7 days of feasting, games, and pointed questions from aunties who measured a woman's worth by the warrior standing beside her. Her first husband, Garak, had been a decorated scout, proud and fierce until a rockslide in the northern pass had taken him 3 years ago. The clan had mourned appropriately. Now they would expect her to have moved on, preferably to someone equally impressive, and they would gather around her like vultures when she arrived alone with her 3 children and no prospects. She was stirring the morning porridge when the solution walked past her window. Quinton Lark was chasing a runaway goat across the property line between their farms, his 2 daughters shrieking with laughter behind him. He was lanky and quick, with sandy hair that fell into his eyes and an easy grin that never seemed to falter, even when the goat made a sudden pivot and nearly knocked him into the fence. He caught the animal by the scruff, hoisted it up, and carried it back toward his barn while his girls applauded. Zara had known the Larks for 2 years, ever since Quinton had moved to the valley with his daughters and bought the struggling farm next door. His wife had died in childbirth. He had told her quietly one evening when she brought over bread, and he explained why his youngest girl, Mira, sometimes cried at night. He was a good neighbor, quick to lend tools and quicker to laugh, and he never once looked at Zara's green skin or small tusks with anything but friendly interest. She set down her spoon and made a decision that was either brilliantly practical or catastrophically stupid. 20 minutes later, she was knocking on his door. Quinton answered with flour on his cheek and surprise in his hazel eyes. "Zara, morning, is everything all right?" "I need to hire you," she said. He blinked. "For what?" "I am not particularly skilled at anything except mediocre farming and catching goats. I need you to pretend to be my fiancé for a week." There was a long, beautiful silence. Then Quinton leaned against the doorframe and said, "Well, that is not what I expected before breakfast." She explained quickly, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess herself. The reunion, the questions, the pitying looks, her children who were already anxious about being different from the rest of the clan because their father was gone. The fact that showing up with a partner, even a human one, would be better than showing up alone and vulnerable to every matron with an unmarried nephew. Quinton listened with his arms crossed and his head tilted, and when she finished, he said, "So you want me to come along, hold your hand, and look smitten?" "In summary, yes, for a week. 7 days, there will be feasting, possibly some games, definitely many relatives." "And you are asking me because," Zara hesitated, "because you are kind, and you do not treat me like I am strange, and because I think you might say yes." He smiled then, slow and warm. "You are right, I will." Relief flooded her so suddenly she nearly swayed. "Truly, truly, on one condition." "Name it." "My girls come too. I am not leaving them for a week, and if we are pretending to be engaged, we might as well pretend we are blending our families. It will be more convincing." Zara had not considered that, but it made a sharp kind of sense. "Agreed. Though I should warn you, my children are a handful, so are mine. We will manage." He straightened and offered his hand. "When do we leave?" 5 days. "Then we had better start practicing." "Practicing what?" His grin turned mischievous. "Our story, our vows. How we met, how I proposed, why you said yes. If we are going to lie to your entire clan, we should at least be good at it." That was how it began. Quinton took the task with the seriousness of a man planning a siege. That very afternoon, he appeared at her door with a slate and chalk, his daughters in tow, and announced that they needed to coordinate their stories immediately. Zara ushered them inside, where her own 3 children looked up from their tasks with wide eyes. "Everyone," Quinton said grandly, "we are going on an adventure and it requires teamwork." The children exchanged glances. Zara's eldest, Casimir, was 10 and skeptical by nature. He had his father's serious eyes and her green skin, and he crossed his arms in a gesture she recognized as her own. "What kind of adventure?" "The kind where your mother and I pretend to be in love." Casimir's eyes went huge. Her daughter, Odalise, age 7, gasped with pure delight. Her youngest, Tavin, age 5, simply asked, "Why?" Quinton crouched to the boy's level. "Because sometimes adults need to tell a little story to make things easier. Your mother has a big family gathering and I am going to come along and help her. But everyone there needs to believe we are getting married." "Are you?" Odalise breathed. "Not really," Zara said quickly. "It is pretend." Quinton's eldest daughter, Eloan, age 9, frowned thoughtfully. "So we have to lie." "We have to act," Quinton corrected. "Like a play. Can you all help us?" The children, sensing the drama and importance of the situation, agreed with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Odalise was thrilled. Tavin seemed confused but willing. Casimir remained suspicious. Quinton's daughters, Eloan and 6-year-old Mira, looked at their father with the weary patience of girls who had learned to roll with his stranger ideas. Quinton set the slate on the table and began to sketch out a plan. "First, how we met. We are neighbors, so that part is true, but we need a moment, something romantic." "You brought me eggs once when my chickens were sick," Zara offered. "Eggs are not romantic, they are practical." "Exactly, we need impractical. What about the storm last spring?" "I helped you fix your roof," Zara remembered. It had been a brutal night of wind and rain, and a branch had torn a hole in her thatch. Quinton had appeared at dawn with tools and no explanation, and they had worked side by side in the drizzle until it was patched. "That could work. Perfect." "So I came over to help, we worked together, and when it was done, you smiled at me and I realized I was in trouble." He said it lightly, but something in his tone made her glance at him sharply. He was already writing on the slate. "Next," he continued, "the proposal, when and how." "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. Your family will ask," Zara thought. "A month ago, somewhere private." "Too vague, give me details." She sighed. "Fine. You took me to the ridge above your farm at sunset. You said you had been thinking about it for weeks and you could not wait any longer. You asked, I said yes, and we have been planning quietly ever since." Quinton was scribbling quickly. "Good. Why quiet?" "Because we wanted to tell my family in person at the reunion." "Excellent. And why am I, a human, a good choice for you?" That question hung in the air longer than it should have. Zara looked at him, at his earnest expression and ink-stained fingers, and said slowly, "Because you make me laugh. Because you are patient with my children. Because you do not see me as something to fear or conquer, just as someone to know." He stopped writing. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said quietly, "That is perfect." The children were watching them with rapt attention. Odalise had her chin in her hands, her eyes shining. Even Casimir looked slightly less skeptical. "Now," Quinton said, "we practice." Over the next 4 days, Quinton threw himself into the role with an intensity that surprised her. He appeared every morning with new questions, new details to refine. He asked about her clan's customs, the names of her relatives, the structure of the reunion. He memorized her parents' names, her siblings' temperaments, the fact that her grandmother was the clan matriarch and notoriously sharp-eyed. He asked what her favorite food was, what songs she liked, what her secret fears were, and he wrote everything down in a battered notebook that he carried everywhere. "You are taking this very seriously," Zara said on the 3rd day, watching him quiz himself on her family tree. "If we are going to lie, we should do it well," he replied, Besides, I am having fun. Fun. Yes. When was the last time you had an adventure? She could not remember. Life since Garak's death had been survival, routine, the steady rhythm of planting and harvesting and raising 3 children alone. There had been no room for adventures. Quinton seemed to sense her thoughts. He set down his notebook and said, "Then let's make this one count." He insisted they practice physical affection. "Your family will expect us to be comfortable with each other," he explained. "We should be able to hold hands without looking like strangers." So they practiced. Sitting side by side on her porch while the children played in the yard, Quinton reached for her hand and laced their fingers together. His palm was warm and calloused from work, and the gesture felt both awkward and oddly natural. They sat like that for long minutes, neither speaking, until the strangeness faded and it simply felt like 2 people resting together. "See," he said softly. "Not so bad." "Not so bad," she agreed, though her heart was beating faster than it should have been. They practiced other things. Standing close together, his arm around her shoulders, her leaning into his side. Each touch was careful and deliberate, and each one chipped away at the wall she had built around herself since Garak died. Quinton never pushed, never presumed, but he was always there, steady and warm and willing. The children, meanwhile, were blending into a single chaotic unit. The 5 of them played together in the fields between the farms, built elaborate forts in the barn, and invented a complicated game involving sticks and a very patient goat. Casimir, despite his initial skepticism, began to warm to Quinton's daughters. Odalise and Mira became inseparable. Tavin followed Aloan around like a shadow, and she bore it with patient grace. Watching them together, Zara felt a pang of something she did not want to name. On the 4th evening, Quinton said, "We should practice the vows." They were sitting on her porch again, the children finally asleep inside after a long day. The sun was setting over the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and the air smelled of hay and summer. "The vows," Zara repeated. "Your family will expect some kind of declaration at the reunion, won't they? A formal recognition of the engagement." She had not thought that far ahead, but he was right. Her grandmother would demand it, the ritual exchange of promises before the clan. "Yes, probably." "Then we should know what we are going to say." He pulled out his notebook and flipped to a blank page. "I will start. Tell me if this sounds right." He cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice had a new gravity. "Zara Thorne, I stand before you and your kin to make my intentions clear. I have seen your strength and your kindness. I have watched you raise your children with courage and care. I have laughed with you and worked beside you, and I have come to believe that my life is better with you in it. I do not come from your people, and I do not carry the same blood, but I promise to honor your traditions and stand by your side. I will protect your family as if they were my own. I will be faithful and true, and I will spend my days proving that you were right to choose me." Silence fell, heavy and full. Zara's throat felt tight. She stared at him, at the way the fading light caught in his hair and the absolute sincerity in his eyes, and she realized with a lurch that he had not just practiced those words. He had meant them. "Quinton," she began, but he shook his head. "Your turn." She did not have anything prepared. She had not thought about this, about what she would say to a man who had somehow become more than a convenient fiction. She took a breath and spoke from instinct. "Quinton Lark, you came into my life when I thought I was finished with new beginnings. You have been patient when I was guarded. You have made me laugh when I thought I had forgotten how. You have treated my children with tenderness, and you have never asked me to be anything other than what I am. If I were truly choosing a partner, I would want someone like you. Someone steady and kind, someone who sees the world as an adventure and meets it with a smile. I would promise to stand beside you in all things, to care for your daughters as my own, and to build a life that honors both of us. She had not meant to say as my own. She had not meant to let her voice crack on the last words. But there they were, hanging in the air between them, and Quinton was staring at her with something fierce and unguarded in his expression. "We are getting too good at this," he said finally, and his voice was rough. "Yes," she whispered. "We are." Neither of them moved. The moment stretched and stretched, and Zara thought wildly that if he leaned forward, if he closed the distance between them, she would not stop him. She might even meet him halfway, but Quinton stood instead, tucking his notebook under his arm. "I should get the girls home. Early start tomorrow." "Yes, tomorrow." He paused at the edge of the porch, looked back, and said, "For what it is worth, Zara, I do not think you need to pretend to be worth choosing. You already are." Then he was gone, walking across the darkened field toward his own house, and Zara sat alone with her racing heart, and the uncomfortable realization that this plan had become dangerously real. The reunion was held at the old clan hold in the Northern Valley, a sprawling compound of stone and timber that had belonged to Zara's family for generations. They traveled together in a borrowed wagon, the 5 children crammed in the back with supplies and luggage, Zara and Quinton on the driver's bench. It was a 2-day journey, and they camped the first night under the stars. The children were giddy with excitement, running through the trees and playing until they collapsed in exhausted heaps around the fire. Quinton cooked a simple stew and they ate together, the night full of crickets and distant owl calls. "Nervous?" Quinton asked later when the children were asleep and the fire had burned low. "Terrified," Zara admitted. "We will be fine. We have our story, we know our lines, and I will be right there with you." She looked at him across the fire, at the easy confidence in his posture, and felt a rush of gratitude so strong it startled her. "Thank you, truly. I know this is strange, but you have made it bearable." "Strange is good," he said. "Strange keeps life interesting. Is that your philosophy?" "One of them. The other is that you should always help your neighbors, especially when they need a fake fiancé." She laughed despite herself, and the tension eased. They arrived at the hold the next afternoon. The compound was already bustling with relatives, tents pitched in the fields and smoke rising from cooking fires. Zara felt her stomach clench as they approached, but Quinton reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. "Ready?" he asked. "No, good. Neither am I. Let's go." Her family descended on them the moment they stepped down from the wagon. Aunts and uncles and cousins, a tide of green skin and boisterous voices, all exclaiming over the children and eyeing Quinton with open curiosity. Zara's mother, a formidable woman named Ursa, pushed through the crowd and pulled Zara into a crushing hug. "There you are. We were beginning to think you had gotten lost." She released Zara and turned to Quinton, her expression sharpening. "And who is this?" "Mother," Zara said, "this is Quinton Lark, my fiancé." The noise of the crowd died abruptly. Every eye turned to Quinton, who smiled and offered a polite bow. "An honor to meet you, madam." Ursa looked him up and down, her tusks glinting in the sunlight. "A human." "Yes, madam." "And you are marrying my daughter, if she will have me." There was a long, dangerous pause. Then Ursa laughed, a great booming sound, and clapped Quinton on the shoulder hard enough to make him stagger. "Well, you have courage, I will give you that. Come, let me introduce you to the clan." The next hour was a blur of names and faces. Zara's father, Thorne, who shook Quinton's hand with bone-crushing force and declared him acceptable. Her brothers, who were more skeptical but grudgingly polite. Her sisters, who pulled her aside to demand details and coo over Quinton's charm. And through it all, Quinton played his role perfectly, answering questions with easy humor, remembering names, complimenting the hold and the hospitality. But it was Zara's grandmother who worried her. Eldara was ancient and sharp, her eyes missing nothing, and she watched Quinton with the focus of a hawk sighting prey. When she finally approached them that evening, the whole family seemed to hold its breath. "So," Eldara said, her voice a rasp of age and authority. "You are the human who thinks he can join our clan." Quinton met her gaze without flinching. "I am the human who loves your granddaughter and hopes to be worthy of her." Eldara's eyes narrowed. "Love, a convenient word, a true one. We shall see." She turned to Zara. "You will both speak your vows before the clan tomorrow night. The traditional exchange. I trust you have prepared." Zara's heart sank. She had not expected the ceremony to be so soon, but Quinton simply nodded and said, "We have." Eldara grunted and walked away, leaving them in a bubble of uneasy silence. "That went well," Quinton said lightly. "She suspects. Maybe, or maybe she just wants to make sure I am serious." "Are you?" The question slipped out before Zara could stop it. Quinton looked at her, and for a moment the mask of the charming fiancé slipped, and she saw something raw and honest beneath. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." That night they were given a guest cottage on the edge of the compound, a small stone building with 2 rooms and a fireplace. The children piled into one room, thrilled to be sleeping all together, while Zara and Quinton took the other. There was only one bed, wide and covered in quilts, and they stood staring at it for a long moment. "I can sleep on the floor," Quinton offered. "Don't be ridiculous." "It is big enough for both of us." They settled in awkwardly, each keeping to their own side, a careful distance between them. The room was dark and quiet, and Zara could hear Quinton's breathing, slow and steady. "Are you asleep?" she asked after a while. "No, I have been thinking. About what happens after this week, when we go home and stop pretending." There was a pause. Then Quinton said, "Do we have to stop?" Her breath caught. "Quinton, I know this was supposed to be temporary, but Zara, I have not been pretending for days now. Maybe I never was. And I think you feel the same." She did. She had felt it building, the slow shift from fiction to truth, and it terrified her. "I buried my husband. I swore I would not love anyone again because losing him nearly broke me. I understand that. I buried my wife, and I thought the same thing. But then you walked into my life with your ridiculous plan and your fierce heart, and I realized I had been wrong. Love is not something you use up. It grows back if you let it." Tears pricked her eyes. She turned toward him in the dark, and his hand found hers across the quilt. "What if I am not ready? Then I will wait. I am patient, Zara. I have nowhere else to be." She held his hand and let herself cry quietly while he waited beside her. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under, and she slept more peacefully than she had in years. The next day was filled with games and feasting. Quinton joined the men in a series of contests, holding his own in archery and wrestling, despite being outmatched in strength. The clan seemed charmed by his determination and good humor, and by afternoon, even her skeptical brothers were clapping him on the back and offering him ale. The children were having the time of their lives. They ran wild with the other youngsters, playing games and stuffing themselves with sweets. And when Zara saw them together, her 5 and Quinton's 2, she could not tell where one family ended and the other began. As evening approached, the clan gathered in the central hall for the vow ceremony. It was a tradition older than memory, the formal recognition of betrothals before the whole family. Zara and Quinton were called to the front, and Eldara herself presided, standing before them with a carved staff and an expression that gave nothing away. "Zara Thorne," she began, her voice carrying through the hall, "you have brought this man before us and claimed him as your chosen. Do you stand by this choice?" Zara's mouth was dry. The whole clan was watching. Beside her, Quinton was steady and calm, and she drew strength from his presence. "I do." "Then speak your vows." This was it. The moment they had practiced, the words they had rehearsed. Zara turned to Quinton, and he met her eyes, and suddenly she did not want to use the practiced words. She wanted to speak the truth. "Quinton Lark," she said, her voice clear and strong. "When you came into my life, I did not expect anything from you except neighborly kindness. But you gave me more than that. You gave me laughter and partnership. You gave my children a friend and protector. You have been patient with my fears and generous with your time, and you have never asked me to be anyone other than who I am. I do not know if I deserve you, but I am grateful for you. I promise to honor you, to stand beside you, and to build a life with you that is full of joy and adventure. I choose you, not because I have to, but because I want to." The hall was utterly silent. Eldara's eyes were bright and watchful. Quinton took a breath. He had his notebook in his pocket, Zara knew, the carefully rehearsed vows written out in his neat hand. But he did not reach for it. Instead, he took both of her hands in his and spoke from memory and heart. "Zara Thorne, I came to this valley a widower and a single father, and I thought my life would be small and quiet. Then I met you. You are fierce and kind, strong and gentle, and you have reminded me that life is meant to be lived fully. I have watched you care for your children with a love that humbles me. I have worked beside you and laughed with you, and somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending that this was temporary. I want to build a life with you. I want to raise our children together, to weather storms and celebrate harvests, to grow old beside you. I promise to be faithful and true. I promise to honor your people and your traditions. And I promise to love you for all my days if you will let me." The last words came out rough, and Zara realized with a start that his eyes were damp. Hers were too. The hall was a blur of green faces and firelight, but all she could see was Quinton, looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered. Eldara's voice cut through the silence. "Do you mean these words, human?" Quinton did not look away from Zara. "Everyone. And you, Zara, do you accept this man as your true partner?" Zara thought of Garak, of the love she had buried with him, and she felt no guilt, only gratitude for what had been and hope for what could be. "I do," she said. "I accept him." Eldara struck her staff against the floor, and the sound echoed through the hall. "Then it is witnessed. The bond is recognized. May you build a strong house and raise fine children." The clan erupted into cheers. Her family swarmed them, shouting congratulations and thumping Quinton on the back. Someone started playing a drum, and the hall dissolved into celebration, food and drink flowing freely. In the chaos, Quinton leaned close and whispered, "Was that real?" Zara turned to him, her heart full and wild. "Yes," she said. "It was real." He smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Good, because I stopped pretending days ago." "So did I." They stood together in the middle of the roaring hall, hands clasped, and Zara felt the weight of 3 years of grief finally lift. She was not finished with new beginnings. She was standing in the middle of one. The celebration lasted deep into the night. There was dancing and singing, and at some point, Quinton was pulled into a circle of her brothers and taught the clan's traditional dances, which he performed with enthusiastic incompetence. Zara laughed until her sides ached, and when he finally escaped and collapsed beside her, breathless and grinning, she kissed him. It was impulsive and brief, just a press of lips in the midst of the noise, but it was real. Quinton froze, and then his hand came up to cradle her face, and he kissed her back, slow and sure. When they finally pulled apart, her mother was watching with a knowing smile, and her grandmother was nodding in approval. "You chose well," Eldara said, appearing beside them like a ghost. "He is steady. That is rare." "I know," Zara said. "And you, human, Eldara said, fixing Quinton with a sharp look. "You have made promises before my clan. If you break them, I will find you." Quinton met her eyes without flinching. "I will not break them. Good." She tapped her staff and walked away, leaving them alone again. "Your grandmother is terrifying," Quinton said. "She likes you." "How can you tell?" "She did not threaten to kill you. That is approval." He laughed, and Zara leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his arm around her shoulders. Around them, the clan celebrated, but she felt cocooned in a small pocket of peace. The children found them eventually, all five tumbling over in an excited heap. "Is it true?" Odalys demanded. "Are you really getting married?" Zara looked at Quinton. He looked at her. And together they said, "Yes." The children erupted into cheers, and Tavin launched himself at Quinton, who caught him with a laugh. Casimir, ever serious, looked between them and said, "So we are going to be a family, all of us." "If you want to be," Quinton said. Casimir considered this. Then he nodded once, decisive. "I want to be." Eloin and Mira hugged Zara, and Odalys spun in circles, singing nonsense, and in that moment, Zara understood what Quinton had meant about love growing back. It was not a betrayal of what she had lost. It was a testament to her capacity to keep loving, to keep building, to keep choosing joy. The rest of the reunion passed in a haze of happiness. Zara introduced Quinton to every branch of the family tree, and he charmed them all with his easy humor and genuine interest. Her brothers took him hunting and declared him competent. Her sisters taught him clan songs and laughed when he got the words wrong. Even her father, gruff and suspicious at first, softened when he saw the way Quinton looked at Zara. On the final night, there was a great feast under the stars, tables laden with roasted meats and fresh bread and pies made from summer berries. The children ran through the fields with torches, their laughter echoing across the valley, and the adults ate and drank and told stories late into the night. Eldara stood at the head of the gathering and raised her cup. "To Zara and Quinton," she declared. "May their bond be strong and their home be full of laughter." The clan echoed the toast, and Zara felt tears prick her eyes again. Beside her, Quinton squeezed her hand and whispered, "Are you happy?" "Yes," she said. "I am." "Good, because I intend to keep you that way." They left the next morning, the wagon loaded with gifts from the clan, and the children sprawled sleepily in the back. Zara's family came to see them off, her mother hugging her tightly and her father clasping Quinton's shoulder in silent approval. "You come back next year," Ursa said. "And bring grandchildren," Zara flushed. "Mother." "What? You have 3, he has 2. Surely you can manage a few more," Quinton laughed. "We will see what we can do." The journey home was easier than the journey out, the children dozing in the sun and Zara leaning against Quinton's shoulder as he drove. They talked about the reunion, about her family's reactions, about the future. "We should talk about the practical things," Quinton said eventually. "Where we are going to live, how we are going to manage 2 farms, what we are going to tell people." "We will figure it out," Zara said. "We always do. Together. Together." They reached home by late afternoon, the familiar fields stretching out under a golden sky. Quinton pulled the wagon to a stop between the 2 farms, and they sat for a moment, looking at the land they had both worked so hard to keep. "I have an idea," Quinton said slowly. "What if we combined the farms, tore down the fence between them and worked the land together? Built a new house, big enough for all of us." Zara thought about it. It made sense, practical and efficient. But more than that, it felt right. A new beginning, a shared foundation. "I like that idea." Yeah, he grinned and kissed her, and the children groaned from the back of the wagon. The next weeks were a whirlwind of activity. They tore down the fence and merged the fields, pooling their resources and labor. Quinton was handy with tools, and he designed a new house with input from Zara and the children. a sprawling structure with enough room for everyone, and a large kitchen at its heart. They worked together every day, sawing and hammering and hauling, and by the time autumn arrived, the frame was up and the roof was on. The children thrived. Casimir took Aloan and Mira under his wing, teaching them the rhythms of farm life. Odalys and Mira became inseparable, constantly inventing new games and getting into harmless trouble. Tavin followed everyone around, asking endless questions and absorbing everything like a sponge. In the evenings, they ate together around a makeshift table, the 7 of them crowded in and laughing over the day's events. Quinton told ridiculous stories that had the children in stitches, and Zara found herself relaxing in ways she had not thought possible. This was not the life she had imagined after Garak died, but it was a good life. A full life. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the new house, watching the children chase fireflies in the field, Quinton said, "I want to marry you for real." Zara looked at him. "We already told your entire clan we were engaged. I think that counts as real." "I mean a ceremony, here in the village, something official, something that is ours, not part of a performance." She felt a flutter of nerves and excitement. "You want a wedding?" "I want to marry you," he corrected. "The wedding is just the party," she laughed. "All right, let's have a wedding." They planned it for the first day of winter, a small ceremony in the village square with their neighbors and friends as witnesses. Zara wore a simple green dress that matched her skin, and Quinton wore his best shirt and a nervous smile. The children stood as attendants, solemn and proud, and the village priest, an elderly man who had known Quinton since he moved to the valley, performed the rites. When it was time for vows, Quinton pulled out his battered notebook, now worn and stained from months of use. He flipped to a page near the back and began to read. "Zara, when I started practicing these vows, I thought I was preparing for a performance, but every word I wrote was true. You are my partner and my best friend. You have brought light back into my life and given my daughters a mother who loves them. I promise to stand beside you in all things, to work hard and laugh often, to be patient and kind. I promise to honor you and cherish you today and always." Zara did not have notes. She spoke from her heart, the words coming easily now. "Quinton, you have given me more than I ever thought I would have again. You have shown me that it is possible to build a new life without forgetting the old one. You have been a father to my children and a partner to me, and I am grateful every day that I knocked on your door with a ridiculous plan. I promise to love you fiercely, to laugh with you always, and to build a home that is full of warmth and joy." The priest declared them married, and Quinton kissed her to the applause of their neighbors. The children cheered, and someone started playing a fiddle, and the village square filled with music and dancing. As the sun set and the celebration continued around them, Quinton pulled Zara aside. "Happy?" "Impossibly so. Good, because I have one more surprise." He led her to the new house, now finished and furnished, and opened the door. The interior was warm and inviting, a fire crackling in the hearth and the scent of fresh bread in the air. But what caught her attention was the wall above the fireplace, where Quinton had carved their names and the date, along with a simple inscription. "A house built on love." Zara felt her throat tighten. "You did this last night. I wanted you to know that this is ours, all of it. No pretending, no performance. Just us." She turned to him, and he wrapped his arms around her, and they stood together in the house they had built, surrounded by the evidence of their shared work and shared love. The children crashed in a moment later, breathless and excited, demanding to see their new rooms. Quinton and Zara laughed and led them on a tour, pointing out the details and watching them claim spaces. By the time they were done, the house felt lived in, full of noise and energy and life. That night, After the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Quinton and Zara sat by the fire, wrapped in a quilt and each other. "You ever regret it?" he asked softly. Asking me to pretend, she thought about it. About the fear and desperation that had driven her to his door, about the lies they had rehearsed and the truth they had discovered. "No," she said. "I do not regret it. It brought me you." "And I do not regret practicing my vows too well," he said, kissing her temple. "Because they were always meant for you." They sat in comfortable silence, the fire casting flickering shadows on the walls, and Zara felt a peace settle over her that she had not known in years. This was home. Not the house, though it was beautiful, not the land, though it was rich and fertile. Home was the man beside her and the children sleeping upstairs, the family they had built from scraps and hope. Winter passed into spring, and the farm thrived. Quinton and Zara worked the land together, their children helping with chores and growing stronger and more confident. The village accepted them without question, and the few who had initially raised eyebrows about the orc-human marriage soon stopped commenting, won over by the obvious affection and partnership between them. Zara's family visited in the summer, a smaller delegation this time but no less boisterous. Her mother cooed over the new house and the thriving farm, and her father spent long hours talking with Quinton about crops and weather. Eldara came too, leaning on her staff and surveying everything with her sharp eyes. "You have done well," she told Zara privately. "The human is good for you." "His name is Quinton," Zara said, amused. "I know his name. He is still good for you." She paused, then added, "Your children are happy. That is what matters." It was as close to approval as Eldara ever came, and Zara treasured it. As the seasons turned, life settled into a rhythm. There were hard days, of course, days when the weather did not cooperate, or the children quarreled, or money was tight. But there were far more good days, days full of laughter and small joys. Quinton never lost his ability to make her laugh, and Zara found that she had a talent for keeping him grounded when his enthusiasm ran away with him. The children grew. Casimir became a steady, reliable young man, taking on more responsibility on the farm. Aloan was clever and quick, always reading and asking questions. Odalise had her mother's fierce spirit and her father's charm. Mira was gentle and thoughtful, with a gift for animals. Tavin was curious and energetic, constantly underfoot and constantly loved. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Quinton said, "Do you ever think about the reunion, about how this all started?" "Sometimes," Zara admitted. "It feels like a lifetime ago." "I practiced those vows so carefully," he said, a smile in his voice. "I thought I was just being thorough. But really, I think I was trying to convince myself it was not real, because if it was real, it meant I was falling for you." "And were you? From the first moment you knocked on my door with that ridiculous plan, I just did not want to admit it." She leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body and the steady beat of his heart. "I am glad you practiced too well. Me too." They sat in silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. The farm stretched out before them, the fields they had planted together, the house they had built, the life they had made. It was not the life Zara had imagined, but it was better. It was real and full and hers. Inside the house, she could hear the children laughing, some game or argument in progress. Quinton squeezed her hand and she squeezed back, and they sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Years later, when people asked how they had met, Quinton would grin and say, "She needed a fake fiancé, and I could not say no." And Zara would add, "He practiced his vows too well and accidentally meant them." And they would laugh, because it was true and absurd and perfect. And because the best stories were the ones where you started out pretending and ended up with everything you ever wanted. Their house remained a place of warmth and welcome, the kind of home where neighbors dropped by unannounced and stayed for dinner, where children played in the yard, and the door was always open. Zara never forgot the grief that had shaped her, but she no longer carried it like a weight. It had become part of her story, a chapter that had ended so a new one could begin. Quinton kept his notebook, the one where he had written their fake story and then their real vows. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, he would pull it out and read aloud, and they would marvel at how close the fiction had been to the truth. He had written about a man who loved an orc woman for her strength and kindness, and he had become that man. She had imagined a partnership built on respect and laughter, and she had found exactly that. The children grew into adults, each finding their own paths. Casimir took over much of the farm work, eventually marrying a girl from the village and building a house on the edge of the property. Aloan became a teacher, her sharp mind and patient nature perfect for guiding young students. Odalise was restless and adventurous, traveling to distant markets and bringing back stories and treasures. Mira stayed close to home, working with animals and eventually breeding horses. Tavin, the baby, grew into a tall young man with his mother's green skin and his father's easy smile, and he split his time between the farm and apprenticing with the village blacksmith. But no matter how far they roamed, they always came home. The house that Quinton and Zara had built became the center of a sprawling, blended family, a place where orc and human relatives mixed without thought, where love was the only thing that mattered. One autumn evening, many years after that first nervous trip to the reunion, Zara and Quinton sat on the same porch, older now but no less content. Their hair was streaked with gray, and their hands were gnarled from years of work, but they still sat close, still reached for each other without thinking. "You remember when you showed up at my door and asked me to pretend to be your fiancé?" Quinton asked. "I remember thinking you would say no. I almost did. It was such a strange request. And yet you agreed, because you looked so determined, and because I thought it might be fun. Was it?" He turned to her, his eyes still as warm and steady as they had been that first day. "It was the best decision I ever made." She kissed him, a simple press of lips that held decades of partnership and love. "Mine too." Inside the house, they could hear the voices of their grandchildren, Casimir's young ones visiting for the week. The sound of small feet running across the floor, high-pitched laughter, the patient murmur of Casimir's voice as he tried to wrangle them for bed. "We built something good," Zara said softly. "We did," Quinton agreed. "Better than I ever imagined." They sat together as the light faded and the stars emerged, two people who had started with a lie and built a life on the truth it became. The farm was quiet around them, the fields resting for winter, the animals settled in their barns. It was the peace of a day's work done, a life well lived, a love that had grown from the strangest of beginnings into something unshakable. And in the morning, they would wake together and begin again, as they had every day since that first tentative agreement. They would work side by side, laugh at small things, weather whatever challenges came. They would be partners and friends and lovers, and they would be grateful for the ridiculous plan that had brought them together. Because sometimes, the best love stories start with a lie told so well it becomes the truth. And sometimes, practicing your vows too carefully means you end up meaning every word. Zara and Quinton had learned that lesson together, and they had built a lifetime on it. And as they sat on the porch of the house they had made, surrounded by the family they had blended and the land they had tended, they knew without question that they would do it all again, exactly the same way. Their story had begun with desperation and pretense, but it had become something far greater, a testament to the power of choosing love even when it was unexpected, even when it was inconvenient, even when it meant rewriting the script you thought your life would follow. Quinton had practiced his vows too well, and Zara had fallen for the man behind them. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the lie they had started with, but the truth they had built together, word by careful word, day by patient day, until the fiction became the foundation of something real and lasting and beautiful. The stars wheeled overhead, marking the passage of time, and the house stood solid and warm, a beacon in the darkness. Inside, children slept and dreamed. Outside, two people who had found each other against all odds sat together, content in the life they had made. And somewhere in the northern valley, at the old clan hold, Eldara sat by her fire and thought of her granddaughter, the one who had brought a human to the reunion and ended up keeping him. She smiled, a rare expression, and raised a cup to the memory of that brave, desperate gambit. "Well chosen, Zara," she murmured to the flames. "Well chosen indeed." The fire crackled in agreement, and the world turned on, full of stories waiting to be told and lives waiting to be lived. But for Zara and Quinton, the story was already complete, a circle closed, a promise kept. They had practiced their vows and meant them. They had faked an engagement and made it real. They had started with a lie and built a truth, and they had lived happily ever after in the best and truest sense of the phrase. Not because their life was perfect, but because they had chosen each other and kept choosing each other every single day. That was the real vow, the one that mattered. And they had honored it from that first nervous handshake to this quiet evening decades later, and they would honor it still, for as long as they both drew breath. The story that had begun with a desperate plan and a practiced performance had become the realest thing in both their lives. And as Quinton took Zara's hand and led her inside, their fingers intertwined as naturally as breathing, they carried that story with them, a living testament to the power of love to transform even the strangest beginnings into the most beautiful endings. The door closed behind them, and the house settled into nighttime quiet, and the farm rested under the stars. And two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way slept peacefully, wrapped in the warmth of a love that had been practiced so well it had become utterly, irrevocably real.